Whether on the field, on the court, or on the balance beam, there's more to winning than the final score. Hi, I'm Patrick Manning of Black Desert Resort. We recognize the effort it takes to succeed. That's why we are proud to partner with the Utah Checkdown, the podcast that tells you the story before the game, then gives you a recap of what happened when it's all over. The grit, the glory, and the disappointments. Join us for stories of Utah's finest athletes and coaches. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to the Utah Checkdown Podcast. And now your host, Josh Furlong.
Welcome back to another edition of the Utah Checkdown Podcast. I am Josh Furlong, joining you today on a drizzly afternoon. Yeah, that's what it is. Drizzly afternoon. Finally getting some rain, finally getting some cold. We're getting into hoodie season. That's the best type of season. So I think we're all happy for that, right? I don't know. But we're gonna talk a little bit of Utah, a little bit of TCU. You know, there's a game coming up Saturday, and I think we're gonna go over that. But I'll also tell you a little bit about kind of what's taken place since the last time we talked. So we'll jump into that. But first, let me tell you about our partners, Black Desert, who are helping with the KSL.com Beyond the Game video series. The videos highlight various athletes and give an inside look into their life. Recently, we talked with former Utah offensive lineman Garrett Bowles about how a second chance at life allowed him to pay it forward to troubled youth. You can check out that video and many others on KSL.com. Black Desert is a new resort destination in St. George that features a championship Tom Weiskopf 19-hole golf course that combines a private club feel with destination resort golf amid lava fields and 360-degree vistas. Black Desert is changing entertainment in southern Utah, and they're just beginning. Black Desert, where remarkable is within reach, home of the Black Desert Championship PGA Tour. All right, let's jump into this. So on Monday afternoon, I did the podcast with the knowledge that Cam Rising was likely out for the season, but it was still what Kyle Whittingham defined as indefinitely. But later that night, after we talked to players and everything, and other coaches, Andy Ludwig included, the university sent out an email to us saying that the Cam Rising season was done. He had a season-ending injury. So some of the audio that I'm going to play for you today kind of has that in mind in terms of we didn't know fully that he was out, although it seemed realistic, but there may be some stuff that we talk about that it was kind of leading to that. But yeah, Cam Rising is out, as anybody that pays attention to Utah knows, and everything falls on Isaac Wilson to be the starting QB, right? This is a chance for him to really prepare for the future now. That's not to say that this season is lost and that Utah is looking at it that way. I absolutely think that Utah can still be in the mix there with Isaac Wilson. I think he's talented enough to be able to get Utah to where they need to be. It's just a matter of the offense and the defense clicking, and like I said, we'll get into that. But that's where we're at, right? Utah's now fully transitioning over to a new QB. There's no plans for Cam to be back, and unfortunately that is, the end of Cam Rising's tenure most likely at Utah. And it's unfortunate that it has to go out that way, as I mentioned last week, but that's the nature of sports sometimes, right? There's a lot of great memories that you can have and a lot of great things that you can look back to for Cam and what he was able to do for this program. But it's unfortunately injuries, kind of get everybody at some point, right? And unfortunately for him, he just continues to be hampered by injuries and wasn't able to continue with that. So we'll see what happens with his future. Personally, I would be very skeptical. Not skeptical, that's not the word I'm looking for, but I don't think Cam is coming back for an 8th season, right? I know that option may be there. But I doubt it. And even if he does come, I would have to feel that Utah needs to move on. If you bring him on, you bring him on as a QB2, as a veteran guy, as a guy that comes in as kind of a mentor more to what to Isaac is doing. So I know that's not an easy conversation. Personally, I think he should go into coaching. I think he's got great potential there, great mind for that, and I think he could do well with that. So a lot of decisions for him to make. Obviously, it sucks for him. This isn't something that he wanted to have at the end of his career, right? And it's tough to see. I guess there's a possibility he could transfer somewhere and play if a team wanted, and I know that would hurt a lot of fans if that were to be the case. But I think this is tough all around. So, but let's talk about what some of the players have been saying. I think there was a lot of I don't want to call it hesitancy, but you're talking to somebody like a Brant Keithy, who is best friends with Cam Rising. Those two have been, thick as thieves. That's a weird phrase. I don't know why that came to my mind, but they've been best friends their entire time here. They've spent essentially their entire careers together, and been through rehabs together and everything that way, and they've just developed a great bond. Obviously, you could see that Brant was frustrated on Friday when Cam couldn't make those throws. And it wasn't frustration at Cam. It's just more like, look, we've got everything, and we can't get it done. And so, it's tough on him because he's got a future that he's looking forward to as well. But I was most curious to hear from him, just simply because of his friendship and kind of what it means to the team. So I'm going to play what he said, but I think it's a good sign for where Utah's at, knowing the situation that they're in. Brant, what's your feelings on just Cam being out for who knows how long?
Yeah, it sucks. Obviously, no one really thought that was going to happen, but shit happens. You kind of have to get behind him and support him however way, and Isaac's up next, so we have to support him 100%, and I get behind him.
It was one of those statements where I didn't expect him to necessarily dwell on it or say, our season's over. Like, that's not what I was expecting. But I think it's one of those things where, him mentioning Isaac and mentioning this is the direction that they have to go, just really shows, his mindset on this season, right? Like, he wants to be able to produce. He didn't come back to Utah just to sit there and hope to get a few yards. Like, he's looking for an NFL future, and obviously he's trying to overcome his last year where he wasn't out or wasn't able to play. Really, it was a year and a half, and so he needs to put stuff on tape, show that he can do it, show that he can get the ball, and so he has to rely on Isaac, right? Like, and I know that's that sounds like it doesn't give full support to Isaac, but I think that's he 100% believes in him because he's seen him. He's gotten passes from Isaac. This isn't a thing where Isaac is struggling that way. But this is where he has to fully embrace it. And I think the direction that Brant Keithy and all the other leaders of this team go, that's going to be kind of the tone for what this team is able to develop. Because if the leaders are down and they're not, putting their support behind, this young freshman quarterback who still has obviously a long ways to go, if you can't get them to buy into that, this season's lost, right? But we're getting that immediately from Brant. He's the first player that we talked to. I don't know how much the players read our stuff or listen to our stuff. I know that it does happen. They do hear it. Mekhi Bernard just tells us that he sees it. But, to have your leaders go out there and put that support behind them, that says a lot, right? And that helps. So you've got to be able to have that. Brant later said, this is an opportunity for kind of a fresh start, right? This is an opportunity for the team to kind of look at this and say, okay, look, we don't have the Cam Rising drama, the saga of whatever's going on with him kind of hanging over the team. And it has been tough, right? This is a situation where the team hasn't really been able to move forward for the last 2 years, essentially, because going into last year, Cam Rising was potentially going to be the starter at some point in the season, despite, all of us kind of assuming that wasn't really going to be the case just based on the timeline for his knee injury. But now this year, everything was going well. He's the starter. The first game, he throws 5 touchdowns, and everybody's looking at him like, okay, this Utah team's going to roll. Even going into that Baylor game, it was looking like it was going to be 40-0 at halftime, and then suddenly the entire tone of the season changed, right? I know it wasn't fully felt until Utah lost to Arizona, but you could see that the tone of the season changed, where going into Utah State, now suddenly you're going with a freshman QB. Okay, you get that, whatever. Then you have Oklahoma State. Okay, you get the win, and people are starting to feel high, but it really wasn't their best performing game. It just kind of, things continue to happen, and Utah's now at this inflection point of where they do need that fresh start, right? They need to be able to say, here's where we're at, here's where we're going, this is the direction that it is, and we've got to put our full support behind Isaac. And that's what they're doing, right? That's not to say that suddenly this team is going to turn around and they're going to be beating teams by 20 points. That may happen, sure. But this is a situation where the team now can come and rally around their leader of the offense, right? And whether he's a freshman or not, he's still the leader of that offense because he's got to be the one in charge. He's got to be able to get in there and do what they need to. So at the very least, this is a team that is now at least saying it out loud that they're all on the same page with what this offensive scheme could be. This is the thing that allows them to move forward and kind of helps them. And I'm going to give you a bunch of audio right here because I want you to hear from Mekhi Bernard, Brant Keithy, and Andy Ludwig on what this transition now means, right? Like how they're taking it and kind of what this means moving forward. So let's start with Mekhi Bernard and talking about what this can mean for the team.
Now that you have some certainty probably the rest of the season with Isaac, how much do you think that'll help?
I think it'll help a lot just because, we have different plays going in for, different guys depending on who's going to go in. But now, we ain't got to worry about that because we know the game plan fully and what we're going to execute in that situation. So I think it'll help us a lot just, building around the guy we got at quarterback rather than building two different game plans. So I think that will be, one of the biggest things to help us.
Those two different game plans became very difficult for this team. And in retrospect, you can kind of see how difficult it's been for the team to manage because all along this team has been managing the Cam Rising offense, right? And obviously when Isaac's in there, they're going to do things to try to help him. But it's still the Cam Rising offense because they need to keep it consistent, right? They need to keep it in that same flow to be able to make sure that when he does come back, they're not missing a beat and suddenly midseason you're changing the offense. Now, yes, they're midseason and now they're changing the offense to some extent, but this is what they were trying to do is they were trying to have two different game plans. So essentially, there were several weeks where Cam took either the majority of the reps and then Isaac still got the start, or they split reps about 50-50 because you didn't know what the status was going to be. I mean, that Oklahoma State game, for one, that was probably the one where Cam starts getting the reps for the beginning of the week, and then Isaac is getting the reps a little bit later in the week to be able to kind of help him, knowing that it was going to be a game time decision. But at the end of the day, it really wasn't a full game plan for him. And so it becomes this situation where Isaac Wilson literally hasn't known any single game going into the season when he's starting that he's going to be the starter. Maybe that Utah State game where there was a little bit more acceptance of Cam not being able to be ready, and you saw him able to kind of do some stuff, but that's early on. This is a team that's just been living in two different offenses, right? Two different schemes, two different players, still trying to figure out what we do, and it's not easy. Right, you're seeing frustrations. You're seeing guys that may be hesitant because they don't know what's going on. And yeah, when you get on the field, a lot of that changes, but it's still not an easy system to be able to kind of have two of these mindsets in your head going into a game. Each week, yes, you can say these teams or these players should know everything about their offense, and you do, but there's individual wrinkles about each game, right? You go into it, that's what's so important about having the full week. Those players that get the starting reps, especially the quarterback, they get those 75% of the reps that Kyle Whittingham talks about. They get all that because it's geared towards specifically this week TCU, last week Arizona State. If you're not getting all those reps, it's hard to get those looks and get comfortable with what you need to do. If you're supposed to run XYZ play and you've only run it a few times and you haven't gained that connection, it becomes much more difficult. You're seeing with Isaac Wilson especially where early on, and we'll see how that goes now that it's been a couple weeks, he's got to develop that touch, that timing with the receivers. He's got to have that connection. That's why, for example, in the offseason, why it's so important for the quarterback to be able to develop that relationship with the receivers and so that they can kind of get a feel for it. It's like when you're on a basketball court, right? If you go out on the court, and I know I say this because, a lot of people have played basketball and they understand how this goes. When you get on that court and you're playing with four different guys that you've never played with, it becomes a challenge because you don't know how they think, right? And so where you're sitting here saying, okay, I'm going to do this pass where, whatever it may be, I don't know how they're going to respond. But when you get a team that has been playing, 5-on-5 forever together, and they've got this connection. You can see the fluidity in the offense, right? You can see how the ball moves around very well, and it's so much easier to play. You understand the tendencies of guys. You know that, okay, I can do a no-look pass this way, and this guy knows that I'm going to throw it to him and not thinking that he's throwing it to somebody else. There's a lot of consistency and just a rhythm into the game. That's the same way with a quarterback, right? If they can't get into that rhythm and they don't understand what it is, it becomes a challenge. It's not easy for Isaac to be able to have that rhythm and that chemistry with these players because most of them were playing with Cam in the summer, right? Isaac was in the mix. He was there. He understands that, but it's not the full time. You're not going to spend the bulk of the time saying, hey, Isaac, throw me the ball because Cam's there, right? Cam needs to develop that. He hadn't thrown, at least in a competitive format, for, a year. And so you've got to be able to have that consistency. So now you're doing that in the middle of the season. Him getting all those reps becomes, incredibly important, to say nothing of what that game plan is going to be and the little nuances of all that. This is where it becomes so vitally important for the team to be able to know, okay, it's Isaac Wilson. That's all we're going with. There's no fear of him looking over his shoulder and saying, okay, well, if you don't do too well, we're going to go to Brandon Rose. Sure, if things get really sideways, then you're going to go with maybe some other quarterback. But this is a year where you've essentially, you're not fully out of the competition, right? Utah can still get to the Big 12 championship game and everything can still be on the table. But at the same time, if Isaac just has some horrible games and he's not able to get to what he needs to, there's some leeway where Utah can actually just live with it, right? Nobody wants to go through that. The fans don't want to go through that. The coaches don't want to go through that. The players certainly don't want to go through that. But you've got an opportunity to be able to help for the next year. The more reps he sees on the field, the better. Okay, so now all of that is there for him, right? You get the opportunity for him. He doesn't have to worry about that. He doesn't have to worry about, am I starting or not? He can now gain that confidence, and he can be out there and just be the guy. Brant Keithy said, you've got to be done with the freshman stuff and just be the QB1. You are QB1 now, right? And the whole team has to rally around him and be that guy. So, yes, he's still a freshman by class, but he's got to be viewed upon as this veteran guy, this guy that they can trust on and be able to support, to be able to have this kind of, consistency and rhythm in this team. So really, really curious to see how that goes. Let me play you Brant Keithy's audio about this and kind of what he thinks will be best for kind of how this situation is panning out.
Do you feel like now knowing it's going to be Isaac and there's no question about who it's going to be, do you feel like that's kind of helped everybody in the room just kind of take a sigh of relief, I guess?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's best for him, honestly, because in those weeks that we didn't know who was going to be starting, Isaac was kind of taking a good amount of the reps, and he didn't know if he was going to start. And I think for him, knowing that he's going to, kind of going to that each week game mode, knowing he's going to start and preparing the right way, I think it'll help him a lot. And just know that we know who's going to be starting, and it's going to be great. Just looking forward to seeing him play and step up.
I think those are great things to say from Brant, right? Your leader is putting that support on you. The team feels entirely comfortable with him, and they feel like this will be better for him. Those are all great things. And so I think this becomes a great opportunity for Isaac to really kind of hone in on what this offense can be and what's there. Brant Keithy, in another comment, and I didn't clip that audio, but he talked about just how, passing in general has been awful this year, right? Like he's not shy about where the team's deficiencies are. And it's not some secret, right? It's not like all of a sudden everybody's like, mouths open because it's like, holy cow, what did Brant just say? This is known, right? It just hasn't been effective. It hasn't been consistent. And as somebody who is a receiver primarily, that becomes a big issue, right? Utah spent the entire offseason talking about how they were going to have a bigger threat on the outside. They were going to be able to throw the ball around more. You brought in receivers that were going to help you, Dorian Singer, namely, Damian Alford, who we haven't really seen, and, there's talk that he may potentially redshirt based on how things are going. But you've got this group of pass catchers, to say nothing of these tight ends, 6 tight ends that are putting in the work and doing what they need to. there needs to be more consistency in the passing game. And I think a lot of that comes to what this is, right? And as Brant talked about, like, this is best for him, right? This is an opportunity for him to be able to move forward and just be the guy. So with that said, let's jump into what Andy Ludwig said of kind of what this could mean for Isaac and kind of what they're looking to do to make sure that he can produce at the level that they hope that he can produce at.
How much does the offense open up now that, Isaac has the full playbook at his disposal?
As he continues to grow and mature into the position, the book will continue to expand with his knowledge and his confidence level. And, it's his show, so we're going to let him roll with it.
Teams have sent a lot of pressure at Isaac. As an offensive coordinator, how do you kind of help him out?
Well, you got to be committed to running the football first and foremost, and then a little bit more extra protection for him, whether it's an extra tight end staying in protection. Play action pass is a great equalizer for that, and we'll lean on all those components here moving forward. The screen game needs to be a big part of that as well.
So first off, as Andy said, this is Isaac's show, right? This is where he has to be the one that is fully invested into this. So he's got to be the one that's watching film. He's got to be the one that's going in and doing the extra work that quarterbacks have to do to be able to make sure that this is there, right? Andy Ludwig can scheme up the plays, but if Isaac can't perform them, it doesn't really matter. Now, obviously there's a pairing there, right? Andy has to be able to give him the plays that are going to make Isaac feel comfortable. And he kind of talked a little bit about that, about maybe adding some more protection to help with the pressures. But at the end of the day, you don't have to be super creative to help Isaac get more comfortable. You see this a lot, especially in the NFL. Depending on the team, and this varies on the team, but you want to get that quarterback comfortable, right? So you're going to do some things that are a little bit easier. You want to get them into the flow of the game to be able to make sure that they can just get that comfort, that they're not in there and suddenly they're throwing, 50-yard dimes down the field and if it's intercepted or it's incomplete, what that can do to the psyche. You're doing things that are easy, those screen passes, those check down passes, those quick and easy, out route passes that are just getting a few yards here and there. Those allow you to be able to get that quarterback comfortable. And then when you need to take that shot, whether it's a trick play or whether it's a deep shot down the field, barring those being available early on in the game, this becomes an opportunity for a quarterback to develop and grow. And I think you're going to see that a little bit more with this offense, where they feel like they can go more into what they call the Utah way of doing things, and be able to utilize his strengths in a way that are beneficial to him, right? Isaac Wilson is not Cam Rising, and Cam Rising was not Isaac Wilson. Isaac Wilson probably has better depth in terms of his throwing. He can hit things that Cam never could do, but if you can get Isaac, comfortable, and you can get him in this system in a way that is better, that's going to change everything for him. That's going to give him that comfort. You saw that really in that Arizona game. He was doing well, right? Like, he was moving the ball with ease. Things were working. He was hitting Dorian Singer. He was hitting other guys and getting that ball downfield. Then, you've got the other problems of the red zone issues, and we've talked about that. But at least you've got a guy that's comfortable. And then that play calling, they need to be better at doing that. They need to be able to get in the red zone better. That's where it's going to be much more of a challenge, where he has to watch a ton of film. He also has to get a ton of experience in the red zone, just because those windows get tighter and tighter and faster, and you've got to be able to make that work, right? You've got to be able to help him feel comfortable in his game plan. He can't run the same things that are going to be the same things that Cam could do, right? That's just what it is. And Andy knows this. This isn't something there that we need to tell him all about. But this is where Utah's at, and they need to move forward and kind of go there. And I don't want to belabor this point too much, because we got to move on, and I want to preview TCU. But this is kind of where they're at in terms of, they're going to embrace an offense that is beneficial to Isaac. At least what they're saying, to us. We'll see what that looks like on Saturday and what they're able to do. But this is a team that is fully supporting him. They had a players meeting on Monday to be able to really just kind of refocus and get on the same page. This was a meeting that Isaac Wilson addressed the team and kind of gave them a rallying cry. And a lot of the players said that they were excited from it, right? Like, they were ready to go and wanted to just. There was comfort, right? Let me play a Mekhi Bernard audio. We'll get into that one real quick and kind of hear what they said about the players meeting.
How do you feel the team has responded now with the news that Cam is out for the year and moving forward with Isaac? Just how do you feel the team has, I guess, responded to that news?
Responded well. I mean, we responded the way we're supposed to. Get behind whoever is leading charge on offense. It doesn't matter who it was. We just gonna get behind them, and those guys in the team meeting we had. We were behind Isaac, and he came up there, he said a few words, and he got us motivated. So we better go out there this week and just put it on tape.
And Makai's not the first person that said, that it got them motivated, right? There was a new sense of optimism around this team that I didn't feel the week going into Arizona State. There was a lot of down guys. Obviously, they'd been living on that for 2 weeks, the loss to Arizona, and so you're trying to get out of the depths of despair. And I think the team moved on, but it definitely lingered over them. This week feels completely different. I think there is a renewed sense of urgency. There's a renewed sense of just playing together as a team. And you heard that, like, they had to respond well. They had to get in there. They had to be able to rally around who was going to be that QB. But more than that, it was a way for the team to be able to just come together. And by all accounts, from players on the offense to the defense, everybody is saying similar things in the sense that they feel really recharged from this. They feel like they're all on the same page. There's a lot of good things happening, and whether that translates on the field becomes another issue, but they're at least all there, and that players meeting helped. A couple years ago, Utah was in a similar situation. They dropped a few games. They had a players-only meeting, and it absolutely helped them. They turned the season around and won the Pac-12 championship. So not saying that this is suddenly going to mean that Utah's in contention for that championship. Until they're not, I guess they are. But I think these types of things where you kind of have to just own up to yourself and say things. I think it was Jonathan Hall that talked about where there's moments where there's players that they work in different position groups, and so you don't always get to hear what other groups are saying. This was an opportunity for them to come together as just players and say, kind of let their mind speak, right? Maybe they're frustrated at this position group, or maybe they're doing this. Whatever it is, at the end of the day, they came away feeling good, right? And we're not going to get a lot of those details. Those player-only meetings are pretty intimate and special for them. They don't give a lot of things away, if ever, right? Outside of just the generic details of what it meant for the team. At the end of the day, it's for them, right? It's their motivating factor. It's what helps them. Whatever needed to be said and whatever Isaac said, got them motivated. And so I think this bodes well for Utah, but there's still more to be done. Looking at the defense, we've talked a lot about the offense. The defense understands where it needs to be as well, right? They're taking accountability. They're understanding where they need to be. Fired up Morgan Scalley kind of got in. He had a raspy voice because he'd been screaming so much on a Bloody Tuesday that it really just it was hard for him to kind of speak to some extent. But he didn't shy away from that. He understands that this defense needs to be better. He called it a good defense. There are some positive things, but they're not elite, right? They're losing containment when they rush the quarterback. They're not tackling the right way where they're doing more shoulder tackles. They're not wrapping up. They're not trying to get to the feet. They're not doing the things that they need to. And so he understands that. The team understands that. Talking to defensive players, they recognize that there's things that they need to improve on. I mean, these are obvious, right? But it's an opportunity for them to kind of recharge and look. And, they mentioned the players meeting as well as being a great opportunity for them. But one of the quotes that I love from Morgan is where he talked about just, he says the deficiencies have nothing to do with the offense. Our job is to keep points off the board, and we need to do that better. That's it. Right? Like, they need to do a better job. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what's happening on the other side of the ball. And yeah, some of that can factor in. And yeah, you can talk about some of these players being out, 4 starters being out. That impacts the team, right? Like, we get that. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to be accountable for it. You've got to do better. For a program that preaches next man up, you've got to be able to be at that level, right? You can't say next man up and then wilt under pressure. And they understand that. It's frustrating to them, and they don't want to put that on tape, but at the end of the day, that's where it is. At the same time, they still feel like they're successes. They still feel like they have everything in front of them that they can do. And this is a team that is taking that accountability. I'll play the Morgan Scally audio just to kind of see kind of his mindset on that.
We got guys, like I said, they're competing. They care. It matters to them. And, it's fun to come to work every day. Losing is no fun for anybody, and it hurts. But, man, you got to control what you can control and focus on deficiencies and where we can get better, and we're doing that.
And it feels that way, right? Like they recognize their deficiencies, they recognize where they're going, and it's just where they need to be. So we'll move on now to previewing TCU. But before I do that, I want to tell you about a little deal that I have that you can use as a promo code if you're interested in the Utah Hockey Club. Obviously, this is their inaugural season. They've had a great start to the season. They ended up losing in overtime last night, but they're still gaining points in the standings and doing well. But if you want to be a part of the action and grab a piece of history with a limited edition 2-piece puck set from Nico Sports, you can. They're only selling 2024, and so you want to get yours before they're gone. If you do want to do this, you can use my promo code Furlong, so that's FURLONG, at nicosports.com. That's NIKCO sports.com. You can save $10 on that set. So give it a look. They also have other memorabilia, not a ton related to Utah, but they do have this Utah Hockey Club set. So give that a look and use my promo code to save $10. All right, let's jump into the previewing of TCU. Now, this TCU team, it's honestly the hottest and coldest team out there, right? Like, there's moments where this TCU team can look decent, where they've got a potent offense, and then other moments where they're getting the doors blown out, by SMU, losing 66-42, and what a score, by the way, 66-42. But this is a team that's 3-3. They're coming off a bye, and so that becomes a dangerous element where now you have 2 weeks going against a Utah team that is now, facing back-to-back losses. It becomes a challenge, and this is at home in a night game and in a night environment where, these two teams have battled it out, back when they were together in the Mountain West. Some pretty exhilarating games for the most part outside of the last one, and I know nobody wants to talk about that, so we're not going to dwell on that last one. But this is a team that has potential, right? TCU is one of those teams that offensively could be one of the best in the Big 12. There's not a lot of teams that can rival what they're doing, and honestly, there's not a lot of teams in the country that are rivaling. I can't even say that right now. You get what I'm saying. What they're doing. But yeah, like I said, they're 3-3. They have losses to UCF 35-34, really close game there. SMU was that blowout 66-42, and then they most recently lost before the bye to Houston, a bad Houston team, 30-19. So not a great situation for the Horned Frogs. This is a team that was in the national championship game 2 years ago with Sonny Dykes, and this is Sonny Dykes, right? Like, he's going to give you these moments where the team looks really good and then moments where they just kind of become mediocre. And I think we're seeing a lot of that now that I think it's his, third year in to his TCU tenure. This is a team that is struggling. And, that loss, just like it was with Utah, that's going to linger, especially to a team like Houston, where, they're not projected to do much. They don't have a lot of the depth and talent that they need to. This is their second year as a Power 4 program. They shouldn't have the same advantages that TCU's had over the last little bit, and yet you fall to them. So there could be a lingering effect from that, or it could be similar to what Utah's facing this week, where it's kind of a renewed effort. Really tough to know. Kyle Whittingham always talks about that wounded animal all the time and how dangerous they can be. TCU can absolutely be that, right? We saw the last time Utah faced a team off of a bye in Arizona that just went sideways. A lot of that probably against Arizona was more Utah's problems. I know it was more of Utah's problems, but still, any momentum you give the opposing team, doesn't help. So we'll see what that looks like, but let's jump into the stats, which kind of paint the picture of who this TCU team is. They're 24th in the country in scoring offense. They average 35.3 points per game. Their passing offense is 5th in the country, where they average 342.8 yards per game. I mean, this is a team that puts a heavy emphasis on passing. It's not quite the Mike Leach air raid, but it has similar components where they're trying to, stretch the field, spread out the field, get those receivers into open space, and then just make, get those yards after the catch and really just, put it to the teams. That becomes a challenge for a lot of teams, especially if your secondary is not able to work out. Utah obviously works in a man-to-man situation. They're not in too much zone. And so there's a lot of individual responsibilities that go into this. And if you get beat, this becomes a real challenge, right? This becomes a situation where I'm really curious to see Utah's DBs, grow and develop. They've done a really good job, but they really haven't had to face a team like this year, right? They've done it in years past. You had Caleb Williams, you had Michael Penix Jr. I mean, like there's a plethora of that Utah's seen over the years, but you haven't really seen that this year in terms of a quarterback that's doing it at a high level, that's able to really utilize this offense the way that he wants to. Outside of that, their rushing offense is pretty much terrible. It's 123rd in the country. They average 95 yards per game. That's not to say that they can't run or that they won't do it. It's just not a huge emphasis. So this becomes an opportunity for Utah to kind of change things up a little bit. Obviously, they're going to have to put a lot more emphasis into that passing game. And if Utah can take away that passing game, this becomes a much easier game plan for them. Defensively, TCU just hasn't been there either. They're allowing 30.8 points per game, so about 31 points per game, which is why they're losing a lot of these. And sure, that SMU number is going to factor into that a lot, but the fact is there's not a lot of defense there. They're allowing teams to score a lot of points, and they're doing it. Now, with that said, as much as their passing offense has been great, their passing defense has been similarly well, right? They're 8th in the country. They're only allowing 155.5 yards. That becomes a challenge when you have somebody like an Isaac Wilson who is going up against a team that those windows are going to be tight, right? You've got some players that are going to make it tough on him. That's not to say he can't do it, but you have a team that is good in that area of the field. So that'll be an interesting kind of game plan to see how it goes. Run defense, they're 108th. They're allowing 180.7 yards per game. I mean, to me, this becomes the Mekhi Bernard game. You have to hope that Utah has some other running backs out there. But this is a situation where Utah can get really creative, right? We saw in that Arizona State game a chance where there was going to be an end around and, Money Parks was going to, run free to the end zone because they just didn't have anybody there. This is a similar situation, not similar, but it's different in the sense that they just don't do very well in the run game. If you can scheme up stuff that allows you to run the ball well, you don't even really have to put a lot of that pressure on Isaac. Let him feel comfortable. Let him do some things. Now, with that being said, TCU would be smart to put some pressure on Utah and really force him into decisions. But if Utah is able to utilize their run game in an effective way, and personally, I would think that's more on the outside. Utah's tried a lot of this inside stuff that, running it up the A gap a ton. It hasn't worked. I think anybody can see that it's not working. If they can do a little bit more on the outsides, I think that helps spread it out a little bit. It helps relax things so that when you do run it up the gut, it becomes an easier situation. But this feels like a game where Mekhi Bernard can absolutely feast. You could get a guy like Dijon Stanley who could do a lot of great things. At the end of the day, utilize him in a way where they see him as kind of not necessarily a trick specialist, but a guy that can get the edge early, and if he's running the ball, that works for him. If not, you've got to respect the wheel route. Do things to build around these elements of the game, right? If you can get that play calling to work that way, you're going to relax that defense a ton. They can't pressure you every single time if you're going to beat them that way. But yeah, I mean, we'll see how that goes, but this becomes a great opportunity for Utah in the run game, and we'll see what Utah decides to do. This TCU team is ranked 14th in the country in sacks allowed. They haven't allowed a ton of sacks, right? Their quarterback Josh Hoover is getting the ball out quickly. That offensive line is giving him enough protection to help him. He's only taken 6 sacks all season. So it's been a good situation for them, and they're able to do what they need to on the offensive side of the ball. The two most damning in terms of defensive things for TCU is they're converting on third down 48.7% of the time. That's huge. If a defense can't get them stopped on third down, this becomes a TCU team that becomes very dangerous. And then the next stat going into the red zone, they're the 8th best team in the country in red zone conversion, and they're converting at a 96.2% when they get in the red zone. And it's not like they're just kicking a bunch of field goals. They're scoring 80.8% of those as touchdowns. So when they get into the red zone, almost always they are scoring. So Utah has to do a great job of not letting them get into the red zone to begin with, but also just doing what they can to be able to make sure that they stop them on 17th, sorry, I was looking at 17th is what they were there. On third down, there are no 7th downs, so I'm sorry for those that think the sport's changed. But if you can stop them on third down, and if you can stop them in the red zone, this absolutely becomes a game that Utah can win, right? Obviously, not allowing them to put points on the board helps a team win, but this is a potent team that can do a lot, and this could be very dangerous for Utah, where if they aren't on their game, especially defensively, this becomes a massive challenge, right? A TCU team that, yes, has not been good, and they've lost bad games, like the Houston, and then you got blown out by SMU. You've lost to a UCF team that has just been hot and cold as well. You could be on the other end of that. And now you've lost a game to Arizona State, and TCU, and you're looking at where you can go next, and there's not a lot of answers. So, look at this team as more than just what their record shows or the losses that they've faced. This is a team that can absolutely do a lot of damage, and they will, right? They're not going to be shy of the environment. They're not going to be overwhelmed by it. But at the same time, if you can build that positive momentum, if you can take them out of their passing element, you've won this game, at least in terms of the defensive side of the ball, right? If you can do that, this TCU team doesn't really have a secondary level or a second game plan to be able to go to. Their run game isn't all that great. Now, considering that Utah has struggled at times against the run, maybe Sonny Dykes mixes it up a little bit. I doubt it. He's not going to stray a lot from his offensive game plan. But if things go sideways that way and they have to, there's a chance that they could pick up some big runs. So at the end of the day, it is stopping that passing game. It is stopping, what they're able to do there. Don't get them in the red zone. Don't allow them into, converting a lot of third downs. And Utah has a significantly higher chance of beating this team. Obviously, the offense has to do their part, and they have to be able to move the ball, and score in the red zone. We can't take that one lightly. But you've got to be able to kind of do that on defense to get this game. So, looking at some players to watch, Josh Hoover is their quarterback, veteran guy. He's been at TCU since 2016. I mean, this is a guy that's been in the system that it's been a long time. He's thrown for 2,007 yards, 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, completing passes at a 68.6% completion rate. Those are great numbers, right? You look at him, and he's doing everything that he needs to be able to get this TCU team in the situation that they need to. Obviously, there's more factors that go into it, but he's doing his job. His QBR is second in the Big 12, just behind Baylor's Sawyer Robertson. Take that with whatever you want to say. QBR is usually a good metric to help show what type of a quarterback is. He's doing it, right? This is a guy that is producing well. He's got a 74.7 grade from PFF, which is their 4th best on the team. He's not going to be the one that necessarily loses you the game. He's not an inaccurate passer. He's not throwing a ton of interceptions. He does throw them, and there's opportunities there for Utah. But this is a quarterback that can absolutely beat Utah, and he's shown that he's able to do what he needs to. I mean, 2,000 yards in 6 games is pretty impressive. So they're going to have to pay a lot of attention to him. Outside of that, their 4 top receivers, they've combined for almost 1,700 yards. They do a really good job of mixing it up. Some of these guys are more of your deep threat guys. Some are more of your intermediate route, slot receiver, that kind of stuff. But you've got 4 of them: Jack Beck, J.P. Richardson, Savion Williams, and Eric McAllister. Beck and McAllister are your 2 highest graded receivers, and they're pretty high. I mean, these are guys that are doing a lot with the ball. They're finding opportunities to be able to get open, and they're having fun with it, right? They're getting those yards. Beck he leads the team with 702 yards and 7 touchdowns, averaging 18 yards per catch. This is a team that is dangerous. Beyond him, your other receivers are pretty equal. You got, Richardson with 332 yards, no touchdowns. Williams with 328 with 4 touchdowns. Both of those guys are more shorter yardage situations. And then McAllister is another deep threat guy, and he's got 322 yards and 3 touchdowns. So a lot of weapons for Hoover to use. And these are you can't just isolate one. Maybe Jack Beck you can focus on a little bit more. Maybe bracket coverage a little bit. He's no Tetaroa McMillan, but at the same time he can produce at a high level. So you've got to respect this. You've got to be ready. You can't just pay attention to one guy. You've got to be able to focus on all of them because they're all talented. They're all going to be able to be making plays to get open. This is a defense that's going to have to be sound, right? They've got to be able to be much better than what they have been to make sure that they don't get guys behind them and open. Outside of that, their leading running back is Cam Cook. He only has 336 yards on the season, but he does have 6 touchdowns. He's only averaging 3.86 yards per carry. It's not to say that he can't do it, but they're just not going to pay a ton of attention to him. Utah still has to respect him and do what they need to limit what he does so that he doesn't break off and have those Cam Scattaboo type runs. Not the same type of player, but you can't allow those big gains or else this game changes completely. On the defensive side of the ball, their top 2 guys are Bud Clark as a safety and Lamarian James as a corner. These are their 2 highest graded guys on the defense. Their coverage grades are good. They're not these DBs that are unbeatable. You can get your opportunities against them, so it's not as challenging as some of the other guys like a Takario Davis that Utah faced with Arizona. But they're good. They're going to make those plays, and they're going to be tough to throw against. And so you've got to be on your game. Isaac has got to be able to hit the windows and not try to force things too much. He's got to be able to recognize them and understand what's going on. And then also you have Travis Broughton, former Utes player that spent a lot of times on Utah's sidelines and was a starter for many years. He's just Travis Broughton, right? Like he's going to be good, but at the same time, he's not the star of that defense. There's a lot of opportunities that you can get throwing his way. His NFL rating is an 93.2, which is pretty high considering his coverage grades and stuff. So I would have to imagine that because Utah understands who Travis Broughton is, that they try to exploit him a little bit. Try to get some passes his way because they know that they can have better opportunities than going up against, let's say, Lamarian James. But that's not to say that Broughton can't make plays, right? Like I'm not here to disparage him and say that he's not a good player. But I just think based on what Utah's seen and based on what has gone on, they know that there's opportunities there. And so trying to scheme towards something that way and helping that would be beneficial for Utah. So that's pretty much it with this TCU team. I'm sure we could get more granular and go into it and look at, where everything's, done and kind of where Josh Hoover works. But at the end of the day, this is a team that Utah has to be, disciplined on defense. They have to make sure that they're respecting that passing game. They're not allowing, Hoover to beat them too much. He's going to get his yards, right? Like this is going to be one of those games where I wouldn't be surprised if he still throws for around 300 yards, 250, 300 yards. It's how you limit those and how you get into that. If you can take some opportunities, is this a game where because they're passing it so much, can Utah get some interceptions? Can they get a pick six? Can they get these things where if they're watching the film, can they translate that into a way where you can see tendencies and you can see things that are going to be there for you? With that said, if you don't break the right way or you have problems that way, these become very potent teams where all it takes is one play and suddenly a guy goes 75 yards for, a pass that was 20 yards or 30 yards. And so, we've seen over the years Utah struggle with these types of teams. I feel like in the more recent past, the Morgan Scalley and the teams have done a much better job of being able to defend them. They understand what it looks like, and they've been able to utilize their man coverage in a much better way. So really, that's the storyline of the game. I'm really fascinated to see it outside of obviously what Utah is able to do or not on offense, and really trying to develop what that game plan can be. So we'll look forward to that. It'll be another night game. It'll be a cold game. Curious to see how that changes it based on the elements. I don't believe it's supposed to have any weather like snow or rain or anything, that kind of stuff, but I know it'll be cold. So if you're going to the game, bundle up. But curious to see what this is, what kind of renewed focus this Utah team has, and if they're able to get a win and kind of start a new trend of being able to get back on focus. So with that, we'll sign off today, and we'll catch you again next week as we recap what Utah was able to do against TCU. And for Utah fans, you have to hope that this team is doing a much better job and you finally get that win and get back into that win column. So with that, we'll sign off. Hope you have a great weekend, and we'll catch you next week.